Hello, I'm Donnie Kiefer, head football coach at West Ashley High School in Charleston, South Carolina. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what are some of the obstacles that can keep your program from being state champions. Now, the obvious, if you just don't have the talent to match up with other people or some of the top tier teams in your league or your organization, then obviously it's going to be hard to win a state title. However, a lot of times, and this has happened to me over the years as well, and I'm sure it's happened to a lot of you coaches out there, you may have the talent that may not be superior to everybody that you're playing, but you can hold your own. You match up pretty well, those kind of things, and you come oh so close to winning that championship but don't quite get there. Okay? Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm going to talk about 10 things that I think can be a hindrance or an obstacle in you gaining that elusive ring in that state championship. And, I've learned through the years. I've been fortunate enough to win 2. I've been close a lot of times, but there are some things that I've been guilty of and had to learn from experience that maybe can help you. And sometimes it's things that are obvious, but we fail to see them when we're in the heat or the midst of the battle. So one thing is a lack of long-term planning, I think, can really be a hindrance. And, earlier in my career, I might have had some of that, not so much in the last 20 years, but, I'm big on planning year-round. I'm big on, leaving no stone unturned and, preparing for everything, every little detail from the strength program, the speed program, through practice schedules, through spring, through summer, all of that. And I think that's one thing that you have to do. I think there's some coaches out there that, and not throwing stones, but I think sometimes coaches feel like, that, well, we've been in this system for a while and my kids know what we're doing, or I believe in our strength program that we've been doing forever. And so they don't really tweak things. They don't really get in that planning mode and trying to, rejuvenate everything that needs to be rejuvenated and maybe change a few things and get better at some things. So, that's one thing. You really have to plan year round, 365 days a year. You don't have to be a fanatic like me and be drawing X's and O's and offense and defense all the time, but you should at least be thinking. Not a day should go by that you're not thinking about and planning everything from personnel, like I said, to practice schedules, to everything that you're going to have to do to take you from the beginning of the season through the end of season, preseason, postseason, everything that goes on. Another thing that I think sometimes can be a hindrance to keep you from winning a state championship when you have the talent level to do it, okay, is weak leadership from the head coach. And now that may sound like I'm throwing stones, but I'm really not. What I'm saying is it's not that the coach is a weak individual, the head coach, but maybe his leadership skills are not on point where they need to be. And a lot of times that can be anything from not being well prepared, not really meeting with the staff enough to really make sure that they're on the same page, to not, really fostering relationships with the players and letting them know that you care about them as individuals as well as what they can do for you on the field. So, a lot of those things can lead to a weak leadership model. You have to be willing to set the standard that you're going to work tirelessly, that you're going to do everything you can do to put them in position to win. And, kids see that, assistant coaches see that, and you have to be the standard bearer and be the one as the head coach that is going to make that kind of commitment so that everyone in your program can see it and build upon it and use it as an example. So that leadership piece by you has to be really strong. The next thing is, a lot of times there's a lack of development in the assistant coaches, and that can be for several reasons. Maybe it's they're coaching a different sport every season and they're really tied down. Maybe it's family, maybe it's just a lack of interest, of not being all bought in throughout the year, and that can be a detriment. I mean, when I was younger and coming up, we had three small children, and trying to do everything for football and strength and conditioning around the family, and making sure that I had enough time for them as well as for everything that I was doing. It is challenging. And at some point, some of your coaches may have to decide that, hey, I can handle this. I can be a master of time management and make sure that I don't neglect my family in any way, but I'm also not neglecting the program, that kind of thing. A lot of times it's just because coaches don't really want to take the time or give up a Saturday or whatever, especially in a regular year, not a COVID year. Everything's online now. But, going to clinics, going to visit colleges, going to watch spring practice, those kind of things. Even coming in and sitting with you as the head coach and making sure that they understand everything that you want and expect from them. So, that's big. I mean, there has to be that development within the staff as a whole, as a unit, and then also individually. If you're going to get better at every position, because let's be honest, it only takes one position being weak to cost you a state championship or to cost you a run for a state championship. I'm not talking about any one particular game. I'm talking about over time, accumulated effect where maybe we're not getting as good as we should be, that kind of thing. And it can happen. And, we all have to be accountable, including the assistant coaches. We have to have that commitment. We have to have that buy-in. And, it's not easy. It's not easy. So that's why, you have to be real careful in selecting your coaches. It's not always about the most knowledgeable either. I've had a lot of great coaches that didn't have a whole lot of knowledge when they began. They ended up being great coaches. Some of them ended up becoming really successful head coaches, that kind of thing. So, they can get there. But when they came to me, they didn't necessarily have the best knowledge, but what they did have was an energy and a willingness to learn and a willingness to commit time to getting better as a football coach. So that's very important. Another thing is lack of year-round player development. We all know that championships are won in the weight room, in the off-season program, in the speed and agility program. You've got to be good in that area, but it has to be just as detail-oriented as everything you do on offense and defense and special teams. It cannot be neglected. And I'm going to say the same thing that I said about, putting in the time and being all in. If there's something you don't know about the strength program or the speed program, you need to do your research. You need to make sure that you're training but not overtraining. You need to make sure that you're maximizing the time that you have with your players so that they can truly become better football players and better athletes, not just the strongest guy in the room. Okay, I've seen a lot of guys that were very strong but weren't very good football players. So, you have to have that balance where you're really making them athletes, not just making them competitive lifters, even though you do want them to handle some heavy weight sometimes, and you do want them to be explosive and coach power. But it's got to be well thought out. It's got to be part of that whole year-long planning and organization we were talking about, because that's one thing that's going to go on year-round. I know within our program, we're lifting year-round. Obviously we'll break when Christmas comes around. Sometimes we'll even open the weight room then if kids want to be there. We're training during the summer, we're training during the spring, all during the school year, we're training during classes, that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that we're doing a great job in that. If your players are not getting developed, that's going to be a detriment for you. But let's go beyond that. Just the weight room, just the speed, just the agility, that's a huge part, but that's not the only part. You have to be sure that you are developing your players as far as football IQ and football mentality. If the first time that you start to talk to them about football specific stuff is when spring practice starts or when summer comes around, now, hey, we're going to get into it, that's something you can be talking to your guys about all the time. You can be meeting with them individually. You can be meeting with them as a group. You can be talking them through your offensive schemes, your defensive schemes, the fundamentals that you expect, even terminology. You'd be surprised how many kids get lost in the terminology because, we've been doing this for a long time. We understand all the terminology, but some of these kids don't. It's new to them. So we need to make sure that they're becoming more intelligent football players every day if possible, or at least, a couple of times a week. year round. Let's be talking football with them. Let's put up some film. We don't have to sit down and watch a whole game. Sometimes that can be counterproductive, but if we can watch a few clips, we can put together a playlist of things that they would need to know and can learn from. Okay, and then go over that with them. Same thing with the coaches. You can do the same thing with your coaches and sit down and talk to them. And your coaches can do the same thing with their position players. So just make sure that you're doing that we're developing coaches, developing players year round, because that's going to really reap some dividends as you go through the season and start to make that push for a state championship. The next thing is, once we're in season, preseason, summer, spring, is really teaching great fundamentals. All weekend long, this past weekend, I watched 2019 state championship games from other states as well as South Carolina. And I was watching a lot of these games, and it was, let's just say, evident that some of these teams that lost in the state championship game had way better talent than the teams that won the game. And the reason for that was their fundamentals were poor. Their schematics were poor. Their execution of what they were trying to do was poor. And I don't mean that to throw darts at people and cut people down, anything like that, but it was obvious to me when I was watching that the big scheme was way more important than the finer details of how to do what they needed to do. And so, you got to make sure that that piece is there, that the fundamentals are great, that the execution is great. I mean, let's be honest. Anybody who thinks that football practice is going to be exciting and fun all the time is fooling themselves and trying to fool their players. It's not going to be fun all the time. It's going to be repetition after repetition after repetition, same fundamentals, same execution, same fundamentals, same execution, over and over and over. And it's going to be that way no matter what level they get to. If they go to college, it's going to be that way. If they go to the NFL, it's going to be that way. Okay, over and over. And that's how you get better. It has to be ingrained. Okay, so execution should never, ever suffer if you're doing enough reps and making it become natural. And the other thing is work ethic. Let's be honest. There's kids out there, and we've all had one or two of them, through the years, maybe more than that, where they are so very talented, but they don't really have the work ethic that they need, either in the weight room, at practice, in film study on their own. They just don't have that work ethic that would match their talent level. And if you can't get them to that, then you're going to have a hard time winning a state championship. Because let's be honest, we're going to count on those guys. It's a team sport. Every single person is very important. But if you got a couple of guys that are your top players and you can't get them to buy into the work ethic and the execution and the fundamentals and just the effort that it takes to get better in it every day, then it's going to be tough to go on and win that state championship. So that's a big thing, that you need to be sure that you're stressing. I think another thing that can keep you from winning a state championship, and I would say one side of this coin is a little worse than the other, or a little more prevalent than the other, is number one, game planning, which I touched a little bit on last week when I was talking about defense, but game planning and then in-game adjustments. I think that's a vital piece that a lot of people overlook. You don't have to be an NFL coach and have a play sheet, a call sheet, that looks like a poster board, that kind of thing, with everything already mapped out. If you like to do that, if you like to have every, first down, second down, third down, short, medium, long call already mapped out for you, then great. That's fine. I do some of that, and some of what I do is I will go with what's working. If you can't stop something, I'm going to do it. Defensively, the same way. You've got to make sure that you have a great game plan and that you anticipate some things, which we talked about the other day. You have to anticipate some things. You have to anticipate things on offense too. You might be looking at a 3-2 or a 4-3 or whatever on every film you've seen. They might come out in something totally different. So you have to anticipate and be prepared for that, both offensively and defensively. And then even more important than that, you need, if you're going to win a state championship, you are going to have to be a master of in-game adjustments. Not just at halftime, not just whatever. You're going to have to really be at the top of your game and show your kids that you know how to make adjustments, that you can do things that can help them win the football game. And if you do that, you have a real chance, because you're never going to have something thrown at you that you can't handle. You're never going to show panic. You're going to be ready for whatever comes your way. Okay. Another thing I think that can be big is lack of trust within the program. And lack of trust can come in different ways, okay? So it could be that coaches don't trust each other, you know? Maybe some of your defensive coaches don't trust other defensive coaches, or they don't trust the other side of the ball, or maybe the head coach doesn't trust the defensive coordinator, or, vice versa. Maybe, that coach-to-coach thing where there's just not that trust level. That's where you have to be willing as the head coach, whether it's regarding you or whether it's other coaches against each other, that you're going to have to step in and you're going to have to be the one that can reconcile everyone. Because unless you're on the same page, you're not going to get there. Okay. Another thing that it can be is coach to player. I mean, there's sometimes where a coach just can't trust certain players to do what they need to do. And then it's not an option. You don't have somebody better, so you can't really say, okay, well, I'm going to fire him because I can't trust him, and I'm going to bring in somebody else. Maybe you don't have anybody else that can even play that position or is not as good as that player. But that lack of trust is going to cause that coach to not want to do some things involving this player that maybe he could do that could help us to win the game or help you to win the game. So, that coach to player trust. Maybe the player don't trust the coach. Maybe you say, hey, our D coordinator, our offensive coordinator, our head coach, whatever, he's just not putting us in a position to win. He's making bad calls. If we would have done this, there's always going to be sour grapes, second guessing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a real trust issue where when a call is made, that player has doubt in his mind. Okay. If that's the situation, that you need to have an open enough relationship with your players that you can go to them and you can say, look, if there's issues, if there's things that you have questions about, just be clear. We're not going to second guess the coaches. We're not going to second guess the game plan. But if there's something you're not sure on, come and let's talk about it. Whether it's you, the player, and me, the head coach, whether it's bringing in an assistant coach, let's talk about it. And let's see if we can get you on the same page with us, or maybe you can explain to us why you don't feel that sound. At least everybody's having an ownership then. So then that's good. And the third thing that you can have is players don't trust players. And we've all seen that, right? And as we played through the years, there's probably many times that some of us have had teammates that we just didn't trust. And for whatever reason, either we knew they hadn't put in the time in the weight room, they hadn't put in the time in film, they didn't give great effort at practice. We've heard them badmouth and whine and complain in the locker room or when we're out on the weekend, that kind of thing. So we know that they're not bought in, so we don't trust them. So we've all experienced that, and that's a very real thing. So you need to have that open line of communication with some leaders within your program, that if any of that kind of backbiting, discontent, that kind of thing is going on, that somebody's going to come and let you know. And then you're going to have to address it, and you're going to have to try to get to the bottom of it, and you're going to have to try to bring that player along to the point where they understand why trust is so important. What's one thing that happens when, if a linebacker doesn't trust a defensive lineman in front of him, what's he going to do? He's going to try to do too much, right? Instead of paying attention to his assignment, he's going to try to make up for what he thinks that guy can't do. Same thing in the secondary. If you got a safety and a corner working together, whatever the read is, maybe that safety feels like, I've got to double cover here and help this corner, and because I think he's going to get burned if I don't help him, whatever for, any reason that any player on the field doesn't trust another one. Same thing with a running back and a lineman. If a running back doesn't trust a certain lineman, he's going to try to cut back too quick, or he's going to try to make something happen. If the quarterback doesn't trust his protection, he's going to try to get the ball out of his hand maybe before it's time to get the ball out. Just things like that. So that's very important that you have trust within your program, and then you have a means and a system by which you can address trust issues. You can't sweep it under the rug. If you sweep it under the rug, it's not going to get better. You can think it'll just go away, but it's not going to go away. It's going to fester, and it may be little in your eyes, but it may be huge to the players or to the assistant coaches. So you need to be sure that you can address that. Another thing that can really keep you from winning a state championship without a doubt is parent and fan undermining. Okay, if you've got parents that are sitting at the table or in the stands or second guessing everything you do, and you can be winning, trust me, you do not have to be losing for people to second guess everything you do. Everybody out there is an expert, you know that. Sitting in the stands, they're 100% right calls every time. They know exactly what to do, so they're going to question everything you do. So there's situations where you might win a game by 36 because you didn't win it by 42. You're a bad coach, and that parent or that fan, they're going to talk to everybody around that can listen. And what happens is that starts to fester and seep in. That second guessing of the program, of the defensive coordinator, of the offensive line coach, of the head coach, whatever, that starts to infiltrate the kids, and that can cost you a state championship because you could be plenty good enough to win it, but then you get these people that are wanting to undermine you and bringing that mindset into the players or the families of the players, and now everything starts to go downhill. That goes sort of back to that trust issue. Okay, so now that they're convincing players or parents of players not to trust you and your staff and what you're doing. So you have to be able to address that. And that's one of the things that we always address at the beginning of the year. If somebody wants to second guess us, that's their privilege. I'm not going to say I don't watch a game on TV and go like, dang, why did he do that? But I'm not out there, trying to bring his team down. That's just my opinion. So, we address that early on, and we say, hey, if you have problems, issues, anything like that, we need you to come and talk to us. If you're out there saying things that you wouldn't say to our face, then you probably don't need to be saying it. You'd be better off coming and saying it to us. And I've had, at one school I was at, I used to have let's talk football meetings, and I would allow people to come in, and I did this as a preemptive. It wasn't that anything was going on. I did it preemptively because I had heard that some people in the community like to second guess a lot of stuff. So I started a little program on Monday nights called Let's Talk Football, and this was even before the season started. And the premise of it was we'll talk about any football topic that you want to talk about. It wasn't like after a game come in on Monday and criticize what didn't go well. This was a pure football talk where they could bring up any topic and we would talk about it. Offense, defense, weight training, speed work, special teams, strategy, anything they wanted to talk about, and we would talk about it. And the idea was that I was going to give them an upfront view or preview that I knew what I was doing, that I didn't need their input on Friday night to tell me how to run the program. And that might sound a little bit arrogant, but I didn't mean it arrogant. I just wanted to kind of head things off, rather than them saying, oh, this guy, I don't know what he's doing, whatever. They had an opportunity to bring it up and see if I did. Or, and I'll let them talk. And it was amazing how the crowd dwindled. It went from a pretty big crowd week 1, less week 2, less week 3, less week 4, because what was happening was a lot of these experts were finding out they didn't know a whole lot of football, or at least not as much football as they thought they did. So, it started out, that it was going to be a situation where they were going to come and they were going to let me know how much they knew. And then after a little bit, they found out that, hey, maybe not so much. But, I don't mean that to sound bad, but it's just the truth. It really happened, and probably one of the best things I ever did. We were very successful at that school, and I didn't think that we wouldn't be. I just kind of wanted to head off some of the negativity, okay? Another thing that will get you home instead of at the state championship game is a lack of administrative support. And That starts early on. That's like getting all your football players in classes, making sure you have everything you need, all of that. And when I say administrative, I'm talking about starting with the AD. If you don't have a good AD that's really going to back you and support you, hire the coaches that you need, help you get football players in weight training classes, get everything you need to make your job easier, then you're not going to win a state championship. You have to have a great athletic director. Secondly, you have to have a really good principal that understands what your needs are and is going to allow you, who is going to allow you to do some of the things that you need to do and trust you and not try to micromanage you. And I've had some really good principals, and I have a good one now, and I've had good ones previously. Same thing with ADs. I've got a good AD now. I've had good ADs in the past, and that has always made my job easier. And the third one is a superintendent. Sometimes that's hard. If you're in a really big school system like Charleston's pretty big, so superintendent's not as involved at the local level or at the school level, but you've got to have a superintendent who understands that the coaches out there in your system, whether there's 2 schools, 1 school, or 20 schools in your system, that superintendent has to understand and give the freedom to the principal and the athletic director to allow you to do some things, and nothing illegal or nothing questionable, nothing like that. I'm just saying, things again like getting kids into classes, make sure that you can do things, tutoring and things like that, and keep your kids eligible, all of those kind of things. But if you don't have that, from the AD to the principal to the superintendent, it's going to be a rough road, and you're going to be frustrated, and there's going to be a lot of things that aren't going to allow you to get to that state championship game. And then the last thing that I'm going to mention is, and this is, I think, the biggest one. I think it is the biggest one. Football is a long and grinding season, or more than a season, because you go through spring. Soon as spring is over, it's time for summer. You go through the whole summer. Soon as summer's over, you're in scrimmages and in games all the way up to, if you play in the state championship, all the way up into the first or second week of December. Maybe different in some states, but North Carolina and South Carolina, that's how it is. So that's a long time. You go in football from May to December. That's a long time, and it's a grind. So my last point on this video is, I think the biggest detriment to winning a championship is mental endurance. And a lot of people are probably thinking physical endurance. Physical endurance is tough, but most kids can handle that, because they're going to go from football to basketball or wrestling into track or baseball. So they're kids. They can handle that part of it. But that mental endurance, that grind, the physicality of the game of football, okay, everything that's entailed, the film work, the film study, the board work, everything that goes with it, I have found over the years that the mental or lack of mental endurance is the number one factor that can keep you from winning a state championship. So that's one of those things where you really need to understand, and it took me a while. I mean, to understand that more is not better. I've talked about this some before. More is not better. As a competitive powerlifter, bodybuilder all my life, I found out the hard way sometimes that more was not better, and I would overtrain and not make progress. But then as a football coach, you have to understand that more is not always better. You have to be willing to back off sometimes. You have to be willing to give them a little bit of a downtime every now and then, to let their minds rejuvenate and let their minds recuperate as well as their bodies. So, sometimes that push and hardcore, which is who we all are. That's who we all are as coaches, and we know it. Sometimes we have to be willing to back off on some of that and give these kids some rest. And I mentioned this a while back. One of the biggest lessons I learned was a few years ago when we had a big hurricane. Then we had floods, and we couldn't do anything for 3 or 4 weeks before the time of Zoom. And then we came back and played a game 4 days after coming back and being off for 4 weeks. And our kids were just so much better. They had so much more energy. Yeah, a lot of that was physical, but a lot of it was mental. They had time to kind of pull away from it. They were still watching some huddle and doing some things like that, but they took some time to not just be football every minute of every day. because let's be honest, it's a drain on them. They have class all day. You know, that's one reason why in our strength and speed program, I want to have my JV's first block and my varsity second block, and I want them to have the rest of the day to eat, hydrate, and recuperate. Okay, I don't want them training fourth period and going straight to practice. Okay, but we have to realize they've been in class all day. They got up early, probably haven't had enough to eat all day. Then they're going to practice for 2.5 hours. Okay, by the time they get home and sit down and grab a bite to eat and do a little homework or whatever they got to do, it's time to go to bed and start it all over again. Okay, and we're asking them, watch film. Be sure you're checking out your huddle film. Be sure you're checking all your coaches' notes that they put to you in huddle. Make sure you're studying your playbook. Make sure you're doing this on top of everything else they got going, and that becomes a mental drain to them. So that mental endurance piece is something that you can affect, that you can help them with, that you can give them a break with, and that you can help them to be sharper when it comes down to the end of the season. So anyway, that's all I got for today. I hope that every one of you get the experience of winning a state championship at some point. It's a feeling that is tremendous, but it's also fleeting. So, don't think that, hey, if I ever win that state championship, then I'm going to be satisfied, because you're never going to be satisfied. Then you're going to want another one. It's like anything else good. If you get something good, you want more of it, okay? And hopefully that desire to get more of it, that hunger to get more of it for both you and your players will actually help you to think more about what do I need to do to get there, and what are going to be the things that are the obstacles of getting there, and how can I eliminate those. So hope this has been beneficial. Have a great day.